Welcome to Chopping with Fire, where we bring you relevant experts in the topics of business, entrepreneurship, self-development, and of course, smart investments. Nominated by the People's Podcast Awards in 2022 and 2023 as one of the top business podcasts. Hosted by owner, doctor, and content creator Dustin Steffi. We are blessed to have our podcast in the top 50, paving the way in 5 major countries and counting, as well as money raised for 2 amazing causes, cystic fibrosis and of course the Boys and Girls Club. With that being said, and without further ado, let's chop it up. I have on with me Parker Olsen. Parker, how are you, my friend?
Dustin, what's going on? Where am I catching you in the world today?
Right now I'm in a small little country town named Fernley, Nevada, which is about 30 minutes outside of Reno.
Cool. Well, I'm
What
happy to
about
be
you?
here.
Where are
Appreciate
you
having
at?
me on the show. I am in Seattle, Washington.
I mean, lucky. I like Seattle, so I don't know.
I like Seattle too, man. I love it out here. Although I think I'll be moving to New York soon, but Seattle is good for now. It's
Oh, for
different.
sure. You'll be
But yeah,
fine.
man, appreciate you having me on the show. I know, I've listened to a couple of your episodes that are just awesome. Most recently, I listened to, I think it was it Joe Rocco about the 3 chords of life. Really like that episode. So I'm stoked to be on here to kind of share my story.
Yeah, definitely. And your story is a unique story. So I think before we dive into that, let's dive into getting to know you a little bit, right? Nobody
Sure.
knows you that listens probably, and if they do, then that's awesome too. Let's just build some credibility here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll give a little background. My name's Parker. I'm 27 from Boston. Kind of have been entrepreneurial my whole life. So, I think about, forming, who am I, right? On a fundamental level. I always grew up and was the younger brother of somebody who I looked really similar to. So it was always sort of compared to him. And I feel like I've taken that with me forever. And now feel like my ultimate fear is being mediocre, and so everything and anything I do can't be mediocre. Like I was just mentioning kind of before we hopped on, entered a domestic partnership this past weekend, which is certainly unique. But yeah, my educational background is in neuroscience and finance. Went into sort of a management consulting role out of school, and then dove into entrepreneurship pretty hard around the age of 23, and I've been in entrepreneurship kind of ever since for about 4 years.
That's awesome. And speaking of you having a doppelganger, Heath Ledger, is he your brother at all? Because you kind of have that, vibe, and you kind of have that look, right?
Okay, I guess I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, that's a great compliment. Come on now, he's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, he was
he
awesome.
was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's a little bit about me. I mean, originally kind of how I got started was I was really into neuroscience. I took a course in neuroscience, and it actually kind of all weaves through to what I'm currently doing too. Took a high school course in neuroscience, and we spent the entire year learning about what different drugs do to the brain. And for me, my biggest takeaway is, and I don't know how familiar you are with this or others are who listen to the show, but is that about 8-10 years ago, I learned that psychedelics are actually really kind of can be really medicinal and really valuable for the brain and for brain development. Where previously I kind of understood psychedelics to be really kind of a dangerous drug. And so that's what sort of kicked off my interest in neuroscience back in the day. And started to become compelled by sort of mushrooms and just what they can do for overall health. So I don't know, are you familiar or have you messed around with psychedelics at all?
I have not messed around with psychedelics. However, some of the greatest musical artists that I like, i.e. Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, a couple of them have. and most of their creativity has come from psychedelics.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. My sort of background starts there. And then, kind of took a hard look at during school and realized, I was going to be in school for about 15 years if I wanted to become a neuroscientist. So I changed course and I decided, I double majored in neuroscience and finance, decided I would go into business. And during college, actually my first day in college, I met a guy in my dorm and he was on his phone on Twitter, and I kind of looked over his shoulder and he was on our Twitter account that had 3 million followers. And I was like, holy shit, dude, what are you doing? Like, can you teach me what you're doing? And he's like, oh, nothing. And I said, I will give you all of my life savings if you teach me what you're doing and how I can do it. And 2 days later, I gave him $3,216. Um, and I just sent it to him, and he taught me how to build Twitter accounts and monetize them. And that was kind of my first steps into entrepreneurship. So I was I built a Twitter account to about 800,000 followers freshman year of college, and then was monetizing it with a blog. And that was sort of my like first step into being like, oh, like you can do things for yourself and make money. And sort of opened my eyes a little bit to that world. Any guesses on what the Twitter account may have been called?
Man,
Shot in the
knowing
dark.
you, knowing you, I mean, you're a creative person. It could go one of two ways. It can go out there, or it could be something simple and I just overlook it. So there's a million guesses that I
I
have.
like that.
I don't know.
It was we called it it was called Shit Your Parents Say. So the idea was, right, like how can you relate to anybody and everybody on Twitter? Everybody, at one point or in time had parents. So yeah, we made that, and that was super cool. I remember, the highest grossing day, I made $1,000 in a day just from running advertisements on this blog and then funneling traffic from Twitter to this blog by posting about the blog on a tweet. People would go and then go to the blog. So anyways, I got into that for a while, and then graduated college, went into a management consulting role, thought I was going to be a big hoorah businessman. I'm sure a lot of people kind of find themselves at that point at one time or another, and honestly got sort of bored, and was like, okay, this doesn't feel like I'm being challenged enough. I wanted some sort of autonomy back. And I ended up spending 30 days, and I went vegan. I thought, I'll go vegan for 30 days. This could be fun. I don't know why people eat vegan besides, I guess I can understand for environmental reasons, but outside of that, wasn't super sure. And it was interesting. I don't know. Dustin, have you ever tried any sort of like dieting or nutritional regimentation?
I have. I've tried quite a few.
Okay,
And
cool,
the best one that's worked for me and I do right now is intermittent fasting.
cool.
I think it's pretty healthy actually, and healthy for your body, depending on what you're putting in your body. I mean, I'm not
Yep,
saying fast for 16 hours and go eat like a whole crap ton of McDonald's, but
yeah.
if you do it right, there's some benefits.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I actually loved doing that one as well. So I spent for 18 months in a row, like 1 month at a time, I tried different nutritional regimens and was just sort of noting like how I felt. And honestly, it was just sort of this like fun experiment, sort of like gave me something to look forward to outside of work. And I started noticing like pretty significant shifts in how I was feeling, or, how much energy I had, or how I was sleeping based off of how I was eating. And kind of like the biggest takeaway for me was when I was supplementing with like these legal, like medicinal or functional mushrooms, I felt really, really good. Like that month felt awesome. And with some of my neuroscience background, I was familiar that these psychedelic mushrooms, a totally different type of mushroom, had medicinal benefits. And so I became, kind of compelled here and was like, what's going on here? And so, next thing I know, I'm trying to get these mushrooms into my diet. I'm going to, local apothecaries and buying like different sorts of mushrooms and herbs. And I started to put them into like an oatmeal around the same time that I was training for an Ironman. So similarly, I was like, man, this Ironman thing seems kind of wild. Let's just sign up and do it. And I kind of had dialed in the whole nutrition thing. And then by the end of sort of that Ironman training, I was taking these supplements every day and kind of telling a lot of people about them. And I was making sort of my own like oatmeal granola. Um, and got through the Ironman, and next thing I know, I'm like at a startup conference, just similar to probably what a lot of listeners and yourself are interested in, right? I was just trying to hear other folks. And have you been to some of those like get-togethers, Dustin?
So we just recently finished up Burning Man out here.
Oh,
So I've
cool.
been to Burning
Yeah.
Man a couple times. I've been to
Oh, yeah.
EDC once,
Okay.
and I've been to a couple other things. And then younger growing up, I always hung out with the older people. And so I've I've been around it just hanging out with friends.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And what I found is a lot of these like sort of startup events, everyone's always asks like, oh, like, what are you working on? And I didn't really have an answer because at that point I was sort of just in consulting. And so I made it up on the spot. Lesson number one to entrepreneurship: will it into existence. Um, and I just started telling random people that like I'm making the first like mushroom infused snack to help get these mushrooms into people's diets. Um, and have you come across any of these mushrooms like lion's mane or like chaga or cordyceps, any of those mushrooms at all?
I have not, but I would venture to guess if I asked a couple of my buddies, they have.
Yeah. Yeah. They've sort of become popular like on the coasts, and the realization these mushrooms are totally legal. You can buy some of them at the grocery store. They've been used medicinally for quite literally thousands of years in Asia. Like from a documentation standpoint, they're actually, some of the oldest documented like quote unquote medicines that humanity knows about. So really, really interesting that they have a really long history. And so I started telling people about this at this startup conference, and everybody was like, "Cool, don't care." And one guy who was an angel investor who was there was like, "I think that's really smart. I think that's going to be a huge wave." And I thought, "Okay, cool." And he said, "Send me your pitch deck." And I said, "Sure, I'll send it to you tomorrow." And Dustin, I went home. I went onto Fiverr. I found somebody to build the logo, and I got the logo built and put together a PowerPoint deck and sent a pitch deck. And that was the day that my first business was created, and it was all a complete sham, a total lie. Um, and that was back in late 2019. That's a little bit of sort of my beginning roots and sort of my beginning history, and then I've kind of delved into a lot of things since.
So, couple things that I took from that. One, uh, you are a badass at building social media, because to get to 800K, I haven't even gotten to that. I don't. What's the secret there? Because
Yeah,
you
we could start
built
there.
that. I mean, and we're in a day and age of tons of social media. So was it organic? Did you have a bot flowing through to get that inflated? Like, how did you build that? That I'm interested in. And then obviously your whole conversation is interesting. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, and not something I actually like really talk much about. And the answer may not surprise you, or it may. So the guy who I knew, and I later found out he had about 10 to 12 Twitter accounts, all within the range of like 400,000 to 2 million followers. He showed me how you do it, and what you do is you actually find, it really starts once you get an account up to 100K, which we can talk about in a second of how you get there. But once you get above 100K, what you're doing is you're messaging other accounts that have anywhere from 100 to 300K or within the same band as you, and you're trading retweets. So like, hey, I will repost your content for 15 minutes today if you repost my content, and then I'm reposting like their top 3 tweets to my audience. And so what you're starting to do is cross over your content into a new audience and their content into your audience, and you're trading it, right? So it's almost like a service trade. So that was how I grew from about 100,000 up to 800,000 roughly. The other major thing here is like, how did I get to 100,000 and then continue that growth? Is the kid who I became friends and paid him to show me how to do it. He was originally, once I started the account, he was retweeting my content on his accounts to help me get started. So it sort of comes back to this thing of like, who do you know, right? Who are you connected with, and who's willing to help? And I remember there were days where I'd put out a couple tweets a day, and maybe one or two tweets got some good organic following, and so he'd say, okay, we're going to retweet those, and I would see you know 4 to 10,000 followers in a day sometimes, like on really good tweets, and like it just sort of like he would retweet it on a couple accounts, and it would related with a lot of people, and immediately like we're following.
And I know Twitter has changed, and I guess we should be using it by its name,
X.
X. X X is the new Twitter. So
Yeah.
that's changed. The landscape has changed. Does the same strategy, in your opinion, work for Facebook or
Yeah.
Instagram or TikTok?
Well, it's hard because you can't trade, like you can't like retweet on some of those platforms. You could remix, right? So I'd imagine the same strategy may still be being deployed, but I also imagine that like how the algorithm works, especially on like a TikTok platform where like, hey, it's not just your followers that are seeing things, it's sort of like being broadly produced. I'd imagine the reach would be slightly different, but if I had to guess, I would bet that the strategy is still being deployed. Yeah, today.
Good, good. I mean, I think that those are relevant questions considering the day and age we're in right now, and with
Yeah.
businesses starting to utilize technology a little bit more. I think a lot of marketing is done on social media. So I think it's important to understand how do you grow your social presence, which
Hmm.
I still think a lot of these businesses struggle with. I mean, even me being 2 years in with the podcast, I could be a little bit bigger than I am. And so I even struggle.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I actually kind of sunset the Twitter extravaganza because it became really anxiety inducing because it was like every 15 minutes I would have to like retweet another account and then like unretweet the previous account. And that was kind of the bartering system. It was like you'd retweet every 15 minutes with another account. And that just became very like stressful to me. And I didn't, and it was taking joy away from me where like I was making money, but like I almost like it wasn't worth it for me at that time. And I hadn't figured out how to like build a good system around that, or maybe like hire someone to do that, if I could have afforded that and whatnot. But that was more of me being more naive than anything else.
So let's dive a little deeper in your story because we just hit like the tip of the iceberg. We haven't cracked the iceberg yet.
Yeah.
You have more of a story that is even more interesting that we need to dive into. So let's dive into that a little bit. So
Yeah.
we already know you're an entrepreneur. We already know that you have that spirit and that you do it, but to what extent? So let's dive into that.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of, where we left off, right, is like I was sort of messing around with this food concept where like we take these different mushrooms and we take them in a powder and extract format. And we put them and we fortify different snacks with them. So like we have our flagship product is a loose bag of granola. And right when I started the company, I was just sort of following my nose. Like I was, while I sent out this pitch deck, I thought to myself, okay, I better start trying to sell this. Okay, who would buy granola? Cafes maybe. So I would bake the granola at home and I'd put it in baggies and I would drive around to different cafes and I'd be like, hey, I've got this revolutionary granola, you know, would love to sell it to you, blah, blah, blah. Here's why it's super unique. And got a lot of rejections and feedback, but a couple cafes brought me on. And then I had to start producing more granola, and I'm like, okay, well, I need a place to put ingredients, and I don't have money to rent a place, so I just started doing it in my room. So I bought like racking, like big metal racks, and I put it up in my room. And then next thing I know, fast forward 3 4 months, is I would, when I woke up in the morning, I would move a bunch of boxes off of my desk and like other furniture in my bedroom, and I'd put it onto my bed, and my entire room was covered with like 50-pound bags of oats, like finished product, all sorts of crap, where I was like I was living it, right? And it was kind of stressful. And so I decided, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need more space, but I can't afford any more space. What should I do? And I decided I would move outside. So we had a backyard. I was living with roommates, and I moved out into a tent into my backyard for 2 years. Threw out my bed. I moved in more storage racks, a desk space, and we ended up hiring some interns, and that became our office. And I lived outside like in a tent situation. My roommates were cool with it for 2 years while I started to kind of build the business early on. And people thought I was insane. Like people like could not believe that I was living outside. And Dustin, honestly, some of the best sleep I ever got was out in that tent. I still think about that kind of to this day. So that was sort of the next stage of sort of entrepreneurship for me, was like getting something off the ground and being like as scrappy as needed and shameless as needed to possibly do that.
You took Scrappy to a whole different level, my friend. I mean, one, I agree with being outside and it being peaceful. I like the country. I'm very into that. I'm very into camping and hunting and all of that stuff. So I'm into that. But man,
Yeah.
you take entrepreneurship to a whole new level.
Yeah, and people would come, approach me and be like, "That's insane." And in my mind, I like never even question it. It was sort of like it's this mentality that like what has to happen, like has to happen. And if you're not willing to sacrifice your own sort of comforts of life, like I would second guess about how you want to approach entrepreneurship, or if you're interested in entrepreneurship or at all, because I think, and I think people who listen to your podcast probably know better now, but you know entrepreneurship can get very glorified, and it's oh, we raised this money, and oh, look how great this is, it's all super easy. Like, no, entrepreneurship sucks. It's really, really shitty most of the time. And so anyways, lived in a tent for about 2 years, and we got to a point where we had a packaged product and we were kind of starting to sell in grocery stores. And when we were starting to do that, we had an opportunity in 2021 to sell with a major distributor kind of around the country. And I wanted to go and sort of survey these different markets, right? Like what's going on in the Midwest? Would our products sell well here, or in Southern California, or on the East Coast? And so I sold my car. I took the proceeds from my car and I bought a Japanese import pop-up camper van. So the wheel is on the right side of the road. Um, and you hit a little button. It's a 1995. It's vintage. You hit a button and like the roof kind of pops up and it's a canopy tent. And I got it branded with our branding. The name of my brand is called Forage. And I moved out of the tent and I moved into the van and I hit the road. And next thing I know, I'm sleeping in grocery store parking lots across the U.S. and I did that for close to a year. And that experience was on a whole different level for several other reasons. But yeah, that was super intense. I know you had mentioned that earlier, of something that kind of stuck out to you as being interesting and sort of wild.
I mean, if I had to do what it takes to run the podcast and live in a van or something, I'd do it. And you're just kind of a testament to doing whatever it takes to get the business going.
Yeah, yeah. So did that for a while, and honestly, like that, there was a moment there where like sort of had a quarter life crisis. Honestly, like the van broke down in sort of middle of nowhere, New Mexico. The business was within 2 weeks of running out of money. I actually ended up firing. My brother was working for us and running operations. I fired him that week. I went through kind of like an emotional breakup with a girl. I was in horrible mental shape, but I was by myself, so super lonely. And then slight aside, I was actually also wrongfully arrested for a felony around that same time as well, which was like a whole other story we don't have to get into. But that was super tough. But learned a lot. I met a lot of customers. I got our product on a lot of shelves. I really sort of started to understand the landscape of what does it take to really sell in grocery stores, and really by seeing that firsthand. Um, yeah, so that was super interesting. And then after that, got off the road and started to kind of refocus on, okay, like I know it takes to kind of sell products in the grocery stores. What's next? And I really started to take a closer look at marketing. And this is sort of where like my path starts to evolve again. So, we have these food products, they're selling in grocery stores, we sell them online. And, what I started to realize was a couple things. Like influencer marketing, and marketing, I believe, becomes easier and more organic when you start to market through what I refer to as credibility based sources. So like Dustin, you are a credibility based source. An influencer on TikTok is a credibility based source, right? People listen to you and they listen to these influencers and they like them and they're compelled and they come back almost every week. And so, how can I sort of get that story out there and connect with these people? Um, so I started getting into the world of influencer outreach and, sort of discovered some tools within the AI space to actually help with sort of bulk targeted outreach, specifically to influencers on TikTok. Um, and so I was mentioning it kind of right before we got started as well, but I worked kind of have figured out some systems where we're able to leverage AI and we're able to reach about, what would that be? About 1,100 kind of influencers on TikTok a week, using sort of some personalized outreach and some AI sort of automation involved with that as well.
So speaking of AI, which it's definitely a hot topic right now, what is your opinion? Yes, I'm asking your opinion on
Yeah.
AI. And furthermore, how do you feel about how others think of AI right now? So, I mean, it's very much a mixed grab bag right now when I look at opinions. There are people that love it, people that hate it, people that don't know about it, people that don't care. I mean, it's definitely a hodgepodge of answers. My
Hmm.
opinion on it is, used in the right situation, it's definitely useful and it saves time for you to be able to double up on work, in my opinion, depending on how you use it. So, like, for me, I like to use it to help with maybe articulating tone in a post or
Hmm.
articulation of a book or whatever the case may be. AI definitely is useful. It does not replace the human mind at all. And I will forever and always say that. I think we've done a good job of evolving it, but it still isn't there.
Yeah, I would say I overall agree with you. I mean, my take on AI is similar, right? Like it all sort of depends on how it's being used. I have I really believe like what the major challenge with AI is going to be is not actually like the AI technology per se, but it's actually effectively communicating with AI. I think a lot of people have trouble clearly communicating their wants and needs with whatever AI tool they're working with, right? And so I actually believe that there's going to be a huge job market opportunity and huge opening kind of literally like AI prompt consultants. And these are people that all they're going to do is listen to you and your needs and help you communicate that effectively to whatever AI tool, you're maybe communicating with. I also sort of don't believe AI will be, autonomous, if you will. So I think some people, you hear about like singularity, right? It's like, when do robots take over and like gain consciousness? I don't really believe that's going to happen. I think AI is really best suited with sort of a manual or a human counterpart, right? So, you know, somebody actually needs to be working with the tool. Things a lot of AI tools right now are still pretty nascent and things break, or lots of stuff happens where AI isn't something where you just hit a button and like whatever you want to happen happens. It often requires a lot of sort of manual input and smoothing over. And so that's sort of my other takeaway as well from it. So, what I'm now building, and Dustin, kind of cut forward a little bit. So, I started to work on some of these AI tools for Forage for my brand, and then have recently as well. I'm doing some work for a private equity fund, and I manage a couple of their consumer brands. And right now, I have, along with another sort of partner, we have about 10 full-time employees that are all helping with a lot of these AI tools and marketing processes across all these brands that we're working on. And so, I don't see, and we don't use AI to be a standalone product. I really think it is best used with sort of a manual component. And so what we're trying to get really good at, and we are starting to get really good at, is hiring really talented remote talent, right? So it's a bit more affordable, but there's really great talent out there across the world that can actually help operate and be an operator of a lot of these tools. Does that make kind of sense where it's like the dichotomy of like human labor and AI, not just AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for those that have used like Chat GPT, for example,
Sure.
it builds on what you feed it.
Hmm.
So if you don't know how to articulate to feed the AI, it's not going to feed you the relevant information that you need to create successful tone or uh do something within your tone or voice or whatever the case may be. So like for me with Chat GPT, for example, I sit there for about a half hour and I explain, hey, I'm a marketing consultant that blah blah blah, and I like to use hashtags and all this stuff. You have to
Hmm.
feed the bot the relevant information for it to spit out intellectually the information you need it to. So
Right.
I do not ever think, and I know that's a pretty definitive ever, but I don't think that the human touch side is ever going to go away.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to your point, right? Like AI doesn't comprehend, and I'm using AI generally. We can talk about ChatGPT specifically, right? ChatGPT isn't comprehending and communicating how humans comprehend and communicate. It's learned to understand some like human dialogue, right? So you could type in, hey bro, type me out this, and it'll spit something out. But understanding like how does ChatGPT or some of these AI models want to be communicated with to be most effective is really important, right? So it's like providing an example can be super valuable. Providing a template and sort of guardrails. Hey, I don't want this to be longer than X, or please use Y tone, or consider X, Y, or Z, or reference, A. So really trying to provide it as much sort of guidance as possible versus just thinking that understands what you want in your head, and understanding how to communicate those things really effectively is going to be really, really important in the future.
Well, I definitely agree with your take on it as well. I mean, you and I will see as we go deeper into the coming years
Hmm.
how AI really is going to impact people. In my opinion, I think it's going to be leveraged as a tool to double throughput for work. In my opinion,
Hmm.
I think it's going to help people do their jobs a little more efficiently to add more on for people's workload. Again, I'm not certain where it's going to head, but right now where it's heading, we're in the infancy stage of AI, and there's more to come for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And just I realize kind of now too, I've been speaking a bit vaguely about AI, and some people are like, okay, what does that mean? Like what are you actually using with the tools, right? So just to provide some context, so I've built an AI scraper bot. So what is that? It's a scraper bot is something that goes across the internet and collects information. And what's AI about it is like I've given it an example template of like example URLs. Say, hey, these are the types of pieces of information I want, and then it's able to recognize that same information across the internet, across multiple URLs. So like I've built these databases where like I've scraped like usernames and emails and information about someone, right? And then have used that information that I've scraped sort of all autonomously. This is all in the background that's going on, and have trained, something similar to a Chat GPT bot as well to say, hey, here's all of this information that we have on this person. Here's an example of the types of outreach or prompts or communications I want to send to this person using the referenced information. Can you help me create personalized outreach? And here's the objective of what I'm trying to communicate. And here's the tone. And here's how creative I want you to be. And here are the qualifications around like how long I want it to be, and providing a lot more of that sort of structured detail until you can get like output that is really pretty incredible. Really, I found that using a lot of these AI tools for kind of targeted copywriting can be super valuable.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you. I think it's a tool. Again, a
Hmm.
tool. So it's not gonna replace us. I don't think I think I gotta phrase this right. I do not think that we should be concerned with AI. Where my concern lies is in the user of AI, in my opinion. So, how effectively are you able to use it? So, again, we're in the infancy stage. And so even for people like you and I that are well versed in it, I
Yep.
think that you and I are still kind of getting our feel for AI and how we can use it to leverage for success.
Totally. Definitely.
And congratulations to you, by the way, on creating that scraper bot. That takes, in my opinion, a lot of intellect, which I'm not there on creating things like that. I'll create you video montages, podcasts, and articulate the hell out of things all day long. But when it comes to creating things like that, I don't know.
It's just fun, man. You just kind of learn it. It's like we had have a food brand and we need to figure out how to market, right? And when you try and run ads through Facebook, it's like those channels are so saturated. And I believe in a lot of alternative marketing approaches, and like how can you go to places where channels aren't as saturated, or like how can you go to places that aren't typically considered traditional marketing channels, right? Like living out of a branded pop-up camper van, right? Or stuff like that, or I like to do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. And so that's just sort of evolved into what I'm doing now, right? And so if there are folks out there that are interested in kind of how I do what I do, or like have interesting problems, I'm always happy to kind of learn and just look at what are other people working on, or like, hey, feel free to reach out and say, hey, I'm working on this problem. Do you think some sort of AI scraper bot could help with this or automate this? Like, cool. Would be happy to sort of take a look at stuff like that for people as well.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a nice little knowledge bomb and key nuggets for my listeners to kind of consider. We definitely are going to post your contact information in the
Cool.
episode description. So that's definitely going to help out in getting some people that are interested in looking at this your way.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate you having me on here, Dustin, for sure.
Absolutely. And speaking of getting a hold of you, what are some good medians for people to get a hold of you if they are so inclined to kind of chat it up with you?
Yeah, yeah. The best spot for me, I'm really active on LinkedIn. You can find me. It's Parker Olsen, and then I have a little mushroom emoji next to my name. That's really the best spot to connect with me. If you want to check out our brand, the website is www.forage forij.co. So no M, just .co. And those are really going to be kind of the two best spots.
And again, I'll have this information for my listeners that are listening right now in the episode description to contact Parker and take a look at everything. Parker, I have one question for you. That one question is, if you were to leave everybody with one big knowledge bomb, and I know you've dropped a lot today, what would you leave them with?
I think the most valuable thing anybody can do is whatever really terrifies you, go and do that thing and prove to yourself that you're much stronger than you think you are. And I don't know, and maybe it sounds a little vague or maybe even a little cliche, but I've found that like for me, enabling like a lot of, I guess what I've done kind of in the entrepreneurial space is like going and completing the Ironman for me was like earth shattering, to be like, whoa, like I thought that was impossible. And to go and do that and then to prove to yourself of like, well, what else is there out there that I'm sort of limiting myself on, because I think it's really scary or not possible. For me, that has like opened my mind mentally to learning how to use AI tools, which I would have probably thought was absurd in the past.
And guys, just in case you missed the whole episode, this man's been through a lot. I mean, he's lived in a backyard in a tent for a couple years. He was selling his product from living in a grocery store for a few years. I mean, this guy's been through a lot. So his knowledge bombs to me are definitely important.
Thanks, Dustin.
I appreciate it, buddy. I got you.
Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. I'm here all day. With that being said, Parker, I want to just extend some gratitude towards you. Thank you for coming on. I have fun interviewing people that have been through true entrepreneurial journeys. I'm not devaluing anybody who's had it a little bit easier, even more hard and more difficult than you, but you've definitely like experienced it, and you've kept you've kept going. So I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on.
Appreciate you, Dustin, and we'll be in touch.
Oh, for sure. This probably isn't the last time we talk.
No.
Thank you again for choosing Chopping with Fire as your premier podcast for anything with regards to business, entrepreneurship, self-development, and smart investment decisions. If you enjoyed the episode as much as we did, please head on over to one of our social platforms and leave us a comment and or add us. We do have a TikTok, we do have a LinkedIn, we have a Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well. And also we do have a website. Head on over to www.choppingwithfire.com. That's CHOPPIN with fire.com, and take a look at prior content that we have posted. Lastly, if you guys can, please head on over to your favorite podcast platform and leave us a 5-star rating and review. We love to interact with our fans, and I would love to post responses to your guys' comments. Again, this was another episode of Chopping with Fire.